In this video, we're going to show you how to calculate the toolpaths to cut the sign that you can see on the screen. I'm going to start with a set of vectors created in another session of software, open those and set up the job around them. I'm going to group together some of the vectors to help with selection and then calculate a variety of different toolpaths including pocketing, VCarving and Prism Carving, and some of those will involve multiple tools in order to most efficiently machine. We'll also look at how we can get a time estimate from the toolpaths in the software, how we can create the nice colored preview that you can see on the screen here, and finally how we can group together different toolpaths when we're saving them out to get the most efficient result. Let's go ahead and start a new copy of the software. There are a couple of different ways that we can bring in data that's been created in another design program. We can set up a new job and import our data, or we can just open that data directly and then set up the job around it. And that's what I want to do here. So we're going to click on the icon to open an existing file, and from the project folder I'm going to select the file howlingwolf.eps and hit the open button. So the software has automatically created a job size which is the same size as the piece of artwork that we're importing, and we can see that up here in the width and height area. Now in this case I know that the piece of material that I'd like to cut this sign out of is smaller than the size we've got here, so I'm going to adjust those values to 24 inches wide, 18 inches high, and I can see now I'm going to have to scale down my artwork. We'll come to that in a moment. Z0 for this job is going to be on top of the block. Thickness of our material is going to be 1 inch thick high density urethane foam. And you can see that another automatic thing that's been filled in when we imported the data is this offset here. The software will do this to position the lower left corner of the artwork in its original placement relative to the XY0 position that it was drawn in. So here you can see here's XY0 where the arrow is, and the artwork is just offset there slightly because that's its position that it was actually created in. In this case I want to uncheck that, remove that offset and make it so that my XY0 is in the lower left corner of my workspace. Working in inches, and then here I've got this option when we're setting up the job at this stage to scale the design with the job size. If I check that box, the software is going to automatically scale the design down to fit the new size that I've entered for the job. I'm going to scale that a little bit more in a moment, but I'm happy with the way that looks now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the OK button. Now because my piece of material is 24 by 18, I want to make sure that I've got space around the outside of it to allow the tool to cut the part out without going past the edge of the material. So I'm going to select all the vectors. I can do that by going up to Edit and select all vectors, or as you can see they're using the shortcut Control A. So in fact let's just click, and on the keyboard I'm going to hold down Control and A at the same time and select all the vectors as I have done there. Come down to Set Selected Object Size under Transform Objects, and we'll just make sure the link XY is checked, the anchor is set in the center, and I'm going to change the width to 23 inches and let the height automatically scale. Let's go ahead and hit Apply and Close, and that should just provide me with enough space around the outside of our artwork to make sure the tool stays completely inside the material. Let's just click in the white background to deselect that. You may have seen in some of the videos how we can use the layers to help us organize and select vectors for machining. Another method we've got at our disposal, which is beneficial in some cases, is just to group vectors together. For instance, in this case I know that all the vectors that sort of make up the face and the ear of the wolf I'd like to be able to select as a single object. So if I click up in the left here and drag a box down towards the right that just completely encloses those vectors so that when I let go they're selected, I can now group them together. I can either do that by using the shortcut key, which is G on the keyboard, or coming over and clicking the icon here. When I click this now you'll see that the selection changes so that now they're a solid coloured line, and if I click and re-click on that you can see I can select any part of that and it will pick up all the objects in that group. At any stage I can ungroup those back into their individual entities. Let's do the same with the text. Again I'm just going to click over to the left here, drag down to the right let go, all the objects completely enclosed in my selection box will be picked in the 2D view, and I'm going to use the shortcut key this time, so I'm going to hit G on the keyboard, and there you can see again, if I just click and reselect, that they have all been grouped into a single object. This will make it much easier for me to select those when we go over and start calculating the toolpaths. So with my artwork prepped, we can go over to the Toolpaths tab and do our material setup. So let's click on the icon here to switch to the Toolpaths tab. Come up to the Set button under Material Setup, and we'll just check the values here. Now if you plan to actually machine the example shown in the tutorial, then it's very important that you calculate all the toolpaths using parameters and settings that will be safe and appropriate for your particular machine, the tooling that you have available, and whatever material you plan to cut it in. Here what I'm going to do is assume we're using a 1-inch thick piece of high density urethane foam. This is a very common material used in sign making, cuts very easily, but with the right density it holds very nice detail as well. Here I'm going to set the Z0 off the top of the block. I want to reference a lot of the toolpaths from the top of the block here. 1-inch thick material, XY datum lower left corner as indicated here, and then I just need to check my rapid and home positions are all reasonable values. If I'm happy with that, we can hit OK. Our first toolpath will be to take this area here and to pocket that down 3/8 of an inch. So make sure that vector's selected, click on the icon for the pocket toolpath. Start depth is going to be 0. Cut depth, as I said just then, is going to be 0.375 or 3/8 of an inch. So hit the select button here under the tool area, and from the tool database I'm going to come onto the end mills here and choose a 1/4 inch end mill, 0.25 inch end mill, and hit the OK button. Now at this stage I'm just going to take the default values for the tool and all the other settings that I've got in the form here, so clear pocket set to offset, nothing else selected on here, and we'll just go ahead and give ourselves a name we can identify and hit the calculate button. After we've calculated the toolpath, the software automatically goes into the 3D view to display the toolpath and opens the preview toolpath form for us. Here we can do things like adjust the appearance of our piece of preview material. So if I click on the drop down here, maybe we'll go and choose something like cherry wood for this, and I can preview the toolpath. If I click on the button preview selected toolpath, it'll just animate that toolpath and cut into our material there. Now you can see sometimes it's not always overly clear the area you've cut, especially if you don't have a contrast between the face of the material and the part you've machined down to. One of the ways we can help with that is to use a different colour. Now we could either go with a global colour that will just fill all toolpaths with the same colour, or perhaps if we want to give our preview the appearance of what the finished object will look like, we can choose different colours for each toolpath which are appropriate to the finish that we're going to apply there. So in this case, with that toolpath selected, I'm going to choose the toolpath colour option, and I know that one of the options I would have with this sign is to paint that area white, because it's supposed to represent the moon. So let's click on the down arrow and choose the white colour there, and we can see we get a little white square on the toolpath here, so that's showing me that we've got a colour associated with that toolpath, and more importantly in the 3D view I can now see exactly the area that's being machined with that tool. Once you've ascertained that the result of the toolpath looks correct using the preview, then you may want to think about how you could recalculate the toolpath with different parameters to achieve the same result but more efficiently. In this case, let's just close the preview toolpath form, and let's first look at how long the software thinks the toolpath will take to cut. To do that, we need to check the visibility box on here and then click on the clock icon. What that's going to do is open our toolpath summary, and we can see listed there any visible toolpaths, and as I say, this estimate of how long the software thinks it will take to machine it. This is based on the feed rate that we've set for that toolpath and modified by the rapid rate that we indicate here and this scale factor. The scale factor is important because it lets us tweak the estimate that we get. The software is going to assume a perfect set of circumstances where the tool is going to be able to constantly run at the feed rate that we've specified. In reality though, a CNC machine will accelerate and decelerate as it changes direction, and this will affect the final finished time that it takes to cut something. The scale factor allows you to put in a value that will create a more accurate estimate based on how your machine actually runs different types of toolpaths. In this case, for instance, we've got a scale factor set to 2, and that's giving us an estimate for the toolpath we've calculated there of just over 27 minutes. Now when we run this, we may find it takes longer than that, or it may take less time than that. For instance, if it took a little bit over 20 minutes, we would be able to adjust this scale factor to say 1.5, and that means that in future we should get a more accurate value for a 2D toolpath with that particular setting. Over time, you'd want to tweak that based on running different references with your machine, timing how long they actually take, and adjusting that value accordingly. You're going to find you'll need different scale factors for different types of toolpath. For instance, a 2D toolpath versus a 3D toolpath may require different values depending on how your particular control runs. In this case, we'll leave our scale factor there at 1.5. So that's giving us an estimate of around 20 minutes. But I can see that I'm cutting this part here on 3 different levels at the moment, and really when I'm machining soft material like this, I can probably afford to do it in a single pass with that size of tool. So let's go ahead and close the toolpath summary for the moment. We'll edit the toolpath, which I can do by either double clicking on it or selecting it and clicking on the icon here to edit toolpath. Now if we want to override the settings for the tool, I can click edit, and for this particular toolpath I can change the pass depth to cut that in a single pass. So I'll put pass depth of 0.375 of an inch. We'll leave the speeds and feeds the same. I'm going to hit OK and recalculate that. So in theory this should give me exactly the same result. So if I want to reset the preview the selected toolpath, I can see that that still looks correct. But now if we close that, switch on the visibility and go back into the summary, we can see that that's down to a little bit less than 7 minutes just by cutting that in a single pass instead of 3 and without changing any of the other values. It may be I could even improve that further by running that particular tool faster in this type of material. Let's just hit close again on the toolpath summary. I'm going to undraw the visibility for that toolpath, and for the next toolpath I want to calculate, let's come back into the 2D view, and I'm going to select this group of vectors here that represent the wolf's face. What I'd like to do now is to sort of create a V-carved effect on these, so I'd like a kind of a beveled edge around them. So I'm going to click on the V-carving icon. In here we're going to have a start depth of 0. I'm going to select a tool from the tool database, and this time I'm going to open up the V-bit section, and I'm going to choose a 120 degree V-bit with a 1.25 inch diameter. If you don't have this tool in here, you can go ahead, pause the video and add this to your tool database now. Let's just go ahead and hit OK there. Then I'm just going to take the default settings for the rest of this toolpath form and hit calculate. Now we can see what that's going to give us here in the 3D view, and we can also preview the selected toolpath there. And if we look at that result, we can see it's not really what I'm looking for in this case. The software is just going to calculate a point based on the angle of the tool all the way to the center of the area of that selected set of vectors. That's given me a slightly odd looking result. What I'd really rather have is the same kind of angled edge, but I'd like it to sort of flatten off in the bottom of that pocket and not go so deep. Now we can do that using the same toolpath. If we just close the preview toolpath form there, double click on the toolpath name, we can check this box here to create a flat depth instead of letting the software go all the way down to the natural point. In here I'm going to enter a flat depth of 0.15 of an inch, and rather than let the V-bit clean that whole flat area out with its point, which would be very time consuming, I'm going to use a second tool that will clean that area out first. So if we check this box, hit select, I'm going to choose a 1/4 inch end mill from the tool database there, and I'm just going to take the default settings, hit OK, but then click edit for that particular tool and change the pass depth so that it will cut down in a single depth of cut, and let's hit OK. Again, I'm just going to take the rest of the settings as defaults, hit calculate, and there we can see we've got quite a different looking toolpath. What I'll need to do is just reset the preview, select the first toolpath and preview that again there. Then I'm going to select this second toolpath, which if we switch that on you can see is just the 1/4 inch end mill clearing the main area of this out, and if we preview that we can see how that's going to look. And then if we switch on and select the last toolpath, we can see this is going to be cut with this 120° V-bit, and if we preview that we can see the result that's going to give us, and I much prefer the way that that looks now. So quite a nice toolpath option there, the ability to take the V-carving and specify two different tools to sort of give us this beveled edge effect. Now in addition, I may want to change those toolpaths colours again in order to reflect how we want the finished part to look. So still in the preview toolpaths form, I'm going to select the pocket, and from toolpath colour I'm going to choose this sort of grey here. And then I need to do that with both tools in this case, or both toolpaths. So if I'll select the second one and change the colour there, now you can see that whole area being cut by both those two tools has been shaded in with that grey. So I like the way that looks, so we can close the preview toolpaths form. Just go back to the standard ISO view, and we'll click back on the tab to go into the 2D view again. The next set of vectors I want to machine is this vector here and then the text. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and click on the text there. Because we group that together, I just need to click it in one place to select it. And what I'd like to do is pocket this area out, much as we did with the part of the sign at the top. So with those vectors selected, I'm going to click on the pocket toolpath icon. I'm going to use the same cut depth as we did before, so I'm going to cut down 3/8 of an inch. And I'm also going to start by trying the same tool, the 1/4 inch end mill. So once more, I'm just going to take the defaults in this case and hit the calculate button and see what that gives us. So if we click preview selected toolpath, take a look at that in the 3D preview, we can see that that tool is clearing out the material well, but is not getting in and giving me the detail I need on the lettering. The only way we're going to achieve that is to use a smaller tool. Now it'd be very inefficient for me to cut the whole area with a smaller tool, but just like we had the option with the V-carving on the wolf's face, when we're pocketing we have the ability to use two tools as well. So we can use the larger tool to clear out the majority of the material and the smaller tool to get the detail. So because this toolpath we've calculated isn't quite right, I'm going to click undo last on the preview toolpath form, so we go back a step. I'm going to close the preview toolpath form, select that and click on the icon to edit the toolpath. So now all we need to do is select a different finishing tool. So we'll click the select button and choose a 1/8 inch diameter end mill from the tool database and hit OK. And then I'm going to check this box here that says use larger area clearance tool. Click on the select button and we're going to pick that 1/4 inch tool that we were using before and hit OK there. Now what I want to do is just come in and hit the edit button, and again we'll just override the defaults in this material for that particular tool. So we'll go to a pass depth of 0.375 and hit OK, so we're going to be able to do that in a single pass. Now if you don't see this option to use a larger area clearance tool, it's because you don't have the show advanced toolpath options box checked at the top here, so make sure that's checked and then you'll be able to see this. Now if we work just taking the defaults for the rest of the toolpath, we can edit the toolpath name to make it a little clearer which area it's cutting, hit the calculate button, and now we can see the toolpath that we're going to generate there. Now if I just uncheck the smaller tool, you can see that's the larger tool there clearing the material out, and then if I check that and uncheck that, you can see how the smaller tool is going to get in and clear out the detail for me. There's another couple of ways that we can view these toolpaths as well. One is if we go into the 2D view, we can switch on what's called the solid preview down in the bottom right here. And there you can see now in the 2D view it's shading the area that the smaller tool is going to cut for us, and if I switch on the area that the larger tool is going to cut, it shows us exactly what we're going to get in between those two toolpaths. Again, we can see there the areas that won't cut with the smaller tool by checking that off and then switching that on. Again, the difference that we get in between those. So solid preview, quite a nice feature in the 2D view. Of course we can go back to the 3D view now as well, and I could take the first of these two toolpaths and I could say preview selected toolpath. And if we wanted to, we could change the shading color for that. So go to toolpath color and maybe we'll choose a dark blue color there. So there you can see everything we're cutting with the 1/4 inch tool. And now if I was to select the second one with the 1/8 inch and hit preview selected toolpath, we can see the difference. We could either make that toolpath color something very different if we really wanted to see exactly the areas it was getting into, or for the purposes of visualizing or creating a visual we'll be able to use as a proof, I would really want that to be the same color. So again, with that selected, I'll choose the same dark blue and again give that the appearance of it having been painted. That looks good, so we can close the preview toolpaths form, go back to an ISO view, and I'm going to come back into the 2D view, and just holding shift I'm going to deselect this outer vector so I only have the text vectors selected. Now what I want to do is what we refer to as a prism toolpath in order to create a sharp pointed top on all these letters. So again, with these vectors just selected, I'm going to click on the icon here for Prism Carving. This toolpath strategy uses an angled tool, and depending how deep we make it cut, we'll either end up with just a bevel being cut around our shapes, or as I mentioned before, we can take them all the way to a full sort of pyramid shape. In this case, that's what I want to do, and I want to use 120° V-bit. It's very important that I select my tool first. So I'm going to click select, choose 120° V-bit from the tool database and hit OK. Now what I can do is click on the button that says set depth for full prism. It will look at the angle of the tool and the selected vectors, and it will tell me the minimum depth that I'll need to cut to in order to make sure that everything becomes completely pointed on the top. Anything less than this value that's in here now with that set of selected vectors means that there will be some flat spots on some of the areas in the part that we machine. So as long as I make my cut at least this deep, so in this case we'll just go a little bit deeper and set it to 0.31, then I know I should get completely pointed shapes. I'm happy with the other defaults in here, so I'm going to click calculate. Again, I can preview that and we can see how that's going to look there. And we can also go in with that toolpath selected, change the color, and maybe we'll choose a kind of a gold color to give the effect of those letters having been gold leafed. So again, if that toolpath looks right, we can close the preview, come back to the 2D view, and the last thing I want to do is cut my part out. So I'm going to click to select the outer vector. I'm going to click on the icon for the profile toolpath. I want to cut all the way through my material, so I'm going to set a cut depth of 1 inch. I'm going to select the 1/4 inch mill from the tool database, and again, if we just edit this, we can override the pass depth to cut it quicker. So I'll set it to 0.25 and hit OK. We're going to cut outside that vector, and then there's various other options I can use in order to modify this particular toolpath if I want. One of the options I may want to use is this ability to do a separate last pass. What this will do is machine down slightly away from the selected vector until it gets to the last pass, when it will step in that distance and just clean up all the way around it with a full depth cut, and that'll give us a very nice clean edge without any tool marks at each of the levels that it's cutting down. So let's just add a very small amount in there. We'll go 0.05 in the foam that we're cutting here. I could also add tabs if I want to hold the part in place, and various other options I've got here. I'm just going to take the defaults at the moment, change this, call it profile cutout, and hit calculate. So it won't be too obvious what we did with that last pass there, but if we look closely we can see that it's cutting down a little bit further away, and then that last pass is just going to step in there at the bottom in order to give us a clean edge, and that's really only going to show up when we machine it. We're not going to see that in the preview because the preview is not going to leave tool marks. So here, if we preview the selected toolpath, we can see that cutting all the way through, and because I didn't use any tabs in this case, I can double click on that waste material to get rid of it and show what the finished part would look like. And in this case, rather than having a kind of wood effect on the surface, I think we'd probably go ahead and paint the material first and then mask it, machine through, and paint the areas with machine. So maybe we'll change from cherry to using a solid colour, and we'll change the face colour of this to be black. Now if I like the way that looks, then we could save this image. So we could click on the Save Preview Image button and we could save that as a JPEG, PNG, a GIF or a bitmap and send that image to our customer so that they could give us approval for it. We may even want to present them with different options for the colours, so perhaps we'd want to take the pocket toolpaths here and change that to a dark green colour. We could change both of those over to that dark green and then we could click Save Preview Image and send them something different. And the image that you're going to save will be exactly what you can see in the 3D view, so you can rotate it around, zoom in, move it, put it in any orientation you want before you go ahead and actually save that file out. Once you have approval for the part, you'd be ready to output these toolpaths in order to cut them on your CNC. So let's go ahead and close the Preview Toolpaths form and just take a moment to look at the toolpaths we've calculated. Starting at the top, if I hover over it, I can see that tool information there. It shows me that's calculated with a 1/4 inch end mill, second one with a 1/4 inch end mill, third one with a 120 degree V-bit, then 1/4 inch end mill, 1/8 inch end mill, 120 degree V-bit, and finally the cutout pass with the 1/4 inch end mill again. Now to help me be more efficient when I machine these, I can output the toolpaths that share the same tool into a single file, as long as it's an appropriate and safe order for me to cut them in. The way this works is to switch on the visibility of the ones you want to group together. So here for instance I can switch on the first one, which is a 1/4 inch tool, the second one which is a 1/4 inch tool, the fourth one which is a 1/4 inch tool. I don't want to group the profile cutout toolpath in with those though, because I need to cut that last, so I'm going to leave that separate. So with those three with the visibility checked on, I can click on the Save Toolpath option and then I need to check the box at the top that says Output all visible toolpaths to one file. That's going to check for the visibility down here and then it will just output those in the order that you've got them in the list. So you need to change the order in the list if you want to alter the actual order that they're going to be machined. Software will warn you if you're trying to group tools together or group toolpaths together that have different tools, unless you're using a tool changing post processor. So here I could take those three toolpaths, choose the appropriate post and hit save and save them out. That would be my first toolpath. Then if I uncheck the visibility, I could choose the 1/8 inch tool there and save that out. That's the only toolpath I've got that uses the 1/8 inch tool. Then I could check the two toolpaths that use the 120 degree V-bit and save that out as a single file. And then finally I could choose just a profile cutout and save that one. And so you can see I can more efficiently group these toolpaths together if they share the same tool. Of course, if I have a tool changer, this would not be an issue for me because I can just output them in whatever order I want and the machine will automatically change tools for me. Let's just go ahead and close the Save Toolpaths form there, and we'll also come over and save the file at this stage as well. So let's go up to File, Save As, and we'll call this Howling Wolf _ toolpath, and just save that in the project folder there so that you can open a copy of it if you want to see it at this stage. And that at this point concludes this particular tutorial.